Hi, I made a penguin. I know I said I didn't know if I could pull it off, but I did, and he is so handsome. He'll be hard to send away, but this familiar will go to my Patreon as usual. In 48 hours, I will post a question on Patreon, and the first one to answer correctly will be Pen's new owner. Join my Patreon if you want to participate. Pen the penguin? I'm still not good at names, I know. Here's Rich Aunt Pennybags familiar, the first doll repaint I made for the Monopoly series. Now I know that a thimble is up next. Thank you so much for the people who voted. Pen got hand-painted eyes, since I wanted him to have green ones with dollar pupils, like Aunt Pennybags. I used Coliro paint, some watercolor pencils, a bit of brown ink and nail polish. After painting I seal them with Liquitex gloss varnish, then after drying I give them a blob of the same medium and add the cabochons. Leave it overnight, then cut them out. They didn't turn out half bad. Then I move on to sculpting the faceplate. First I give the aluminum bases a layer of clay and add the eyes. After placing the eyes I made a little beak. The beak is not meant to look realistic, I just wanted it to be cute and soft and, well, you know, make you go aww. Then I sculpt eyelids. As usual I use Living Doll Clay by Super Sculpey. Summer is here, but the clay didn't turn sticky and overly soft, which is nice. I use these silicone sculpting tools. I guess I like plastic and metal for more detailed work, but silicone tools are super nice to work with for the big areas and smooth edges. With some final tweaks on the eyelids, Pen's faceplate was finished. As usual, it looks weird before the paint job though. Then on impulse, because I think it's kind of sad that penguins can't fly with their flippers, I also made a pair of wings, but I'm saving them for another familiar since they didn't fit the aristocratic theme, so this is a sneak peek. I made the feet pretty basic, 3 toes and that's it. I was going for cartoon bird feet. Then after baking I take the pieces off the molds, but before I can paint them with the airbrush I have to sand them a little bit with fine sandpaper, this way the paint sticks better. I use Schmincke. I just airbrushed the faceplate white, but now that I think about it I could have just painted it with normal brush. Airbrushing is more fun though, and I could add a soft blush with some magenta. Then I sealed it with Liquitex matte varnish. Then I used the Army Painter acrylics to paint the black parts of the faceplate. It would have been cool making him a macaroni penguin, but I painted a normal stereotypical one. It's so cool how many different ones there are. I gave the beak a bluish black paint job. Unfortunately, this faceplate didn't get any swirls, since I didn't know where it was going. The feet got an orange layer before I used some soft pastels to shade them a bit. Finally, I can scrape off the paint and seal it with a toothpick and a needle. This is like scraping a lottery ticket, it's so satisfying. The needle I use for the corners where the toothpick doesn't reach, then I brush the rests off and voila, a penguin faceplate. I knew I wanted to give him a monocle, but I didn't know how to attach it, so I decided to use a magnet inside the faceplate. It took some trial and error, some frustration, and a lot of thinking. First, I gogged the faceplate a bit and glued the magnet. This looks messy, but it's not going to show, and it works well. I used a wire from an old notebook to make the base of the monocle, mostly because it was the only thicker wire I had that was magnetic. Then I made a glass out of UV resin. It took 3 tries before I was satisfied. I peeled it off, trimmed the excess, and put it in a sunny window to cure more in the sunshine. While I waited, and to keep myself from poking it, I gave Pen a diamond in the forehead. Then I painted the edges with gold acrylics and some gold glitter nail polish. I left the backside so the magnetism would be strong enough. Finally I glued a piece of string to it and topped it off with a top coat of clear nail polish. The beak got some sparkly Coliro paints too and a layer of Tamiya gloss varnish. Time to make the body. I used 3 black pieces of my base patterns and 1 white piece. It's the regular lambskin fabric as usual because it's so soft and pretty. I start off sewing the darts on all 4 parts, then I sew the sides, leaving half a seam to turn it right side out, and put stuffing into the body. This is the sea urchin face. Let's fix that. I add metal and wooden disc to the cutter pin joint and push it through the circle that makes up the head. This circle I eyeball with the faceplate laying on the fabric, then I twist it through the top of the body. Then I add a wooden disc and a metal disc to the pin. Finally I bend the legs of the cutter pin and twist them with pliers, creating a little heart shape. Now I can sew the head. First I sew around the edge with running stitches, then I put some stuffing inside and close it. Let's do some penguin facts. The emperor penguin is the tallest one with up to 120 centimeters in height. In Happy Feet, Mumble and his Waddle are emperors. Imagine a 120 centimeter tall tap dancing penguin. Where can I get one? Here I'm closing the stitches on the body after stuffing it. The smallest penguin is the blue penguin, 30 centimeters in height. I have dolls that are taller than that. Time for some flippers! I made a rough sketch, sewed them on my sewing machine. I wanted them poseable, so I added a piece of wire inside them before attaching them. It was tricky, but it was so worth it. I made a little incision to embed the magnet a bit better after gluing the faceplate on, which I did using the glue gun. With the help of super glue, I glued the hairs onto the faceplate to make a nicer transition, then for the final testing of the monocle. This is hands down the coolest thing I've ever made. A monocle for a penguin. Next is attaching the feet, as usual with the help of a bead to make it poseable. This is when I tried the wings and was like, nah, I'll save that for the pastel decora themed one. I made him a little red bow like the one Aunt Pennybags have. Is it pronounced aunt or aunt? I'm confused. Am I saying it wrong? I know I mix my pronunciations, depending on if I'm listening to an American or British audiobook at the moment. I hope it's not too annoying. On a side note, if I could make my living making tiny bows, I totally would. Then I made him a little briefcase, a tiny version of Miss Pennybags. I cut the pieces, glued them, left them to dry and then added the hinges. Then I made a faux leather sandwich of it all, gluing the fabric in place. Then I cut the edges and glued the sides. It was tricky making a smaller version since the material was so thick. I also used a clear stamp and some golden acrylics to stamp some ornaments on the corners, then it got some tiny buckles. To cover the white fabric on the edges, I used a permanent marker. I could have used acrylics, but this worked fine. Then it was time to add the red velvet on the inside. Pen might be his monogram for something. If you have any suggestions for a full name, please let me know. Then I made his hat. It might seem like I made it all one thing at a time, but everything is jumbled up due to the gluing, so while some parts dried, I crafted other pieces. For the hat, I used the same materials and technique as Miss Pennybags, so if you want a more precise how-to, head over to that video. I go through quite a lot of super glue, I've realized. As with the briefcase, I used a permanent marker to hide the white interfacing. Let's print money! Penny's supposed to be the banker in Famville and he needs some cash. So I made a bunch of tiny stamps out of an eraser I've had since I started 3rd grade. Seriously, that is like 20 years ago and I still have it. Here's a tiny mirrored 100 stamp. Use an X-Acto knife and carve out the pattern. I'm using an ink pad and pin the small stamps onto toothpicks to make it easier. I've never done this before and I don't know when this skill will become useful in the future. It was fun though. To make them look more realistic, I stamped the sides before I let them thoroughly dry. Then I curled and added 2 of them to the hat as decorations. Lastly, I made coins. First I punched them out of polymer clay with a straw, then I created a 3D stamp using a button and some hot glue. To avoid the clay getting stuck, I had to use some baby powder on the stamps, but this worked well. It gives them some structure instead of just being all flat. After baking, I used my airbrush with some gold acrylics and airbrush medium. I pinned the coins and painted them. To make these more realistic, with variations in the colors, I use some shiny eyeshadow stuff. Of course it dulls the color down a bit, but that is the intention. And that was it for me. I made a penguin. Now I want to watch Happy Feet. That movie is like an ode to those of us who don't feel like we fit in. I loved making this one, especially with all the extra accessories, the magnetic monocle, the briefcase, the hat. It was so much fun from start to finish. I'll be sad to see him go, but I know he'll get a good home at one of my patrons. With that being said, I'd like to thank my Patreons. I hope you like pen. I'll post a question in 48 hours from publishing this video. I decided to combine the other tokens in my Monopoly series with different themes and make the thimble combined with a fairy, like a little crafting pixie. She's half finished already and the video will be up next weekend. So let me introduce Pen. I love the detachable monocle and the hat is just fabulous. I hope you enjoyed watching the long process of making Pen Aunt Pennybags familiar. Subscribe for future videos and have a nice evening, or day, you know, depending on when you're watching this. Until next time, bye!